Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to have another example of the Office of the Inspector General in Columbus, Ohio, the Inspector General for Public Safety, and the Columbus Police Civilian Review Board. This is going to be another example of their ignorance and incompetence and their inability to effectively do the job that they're being asked to do. I've made several videos on this topic here recently. This one is going to have a little bit of a twist to it. The videos that I've made recently are ones that I complained about the Office of the Inspector General sustaining complaints against officers where they did not do anything wrong, where they lied in their investigation, they put a bunch of false information, they falsely interpreted the law, the rules, and they use that false interpretation as a way to sustain a complaint against a police officer. You know, false allegations being sustained, that's a big deal. That's a major problem. And that's something that needs to be put to an end. The video for today is kind of the same, but the opposite at the same time. Today's video is going to be a case that I saw on the Civilian Review Board where they actually exonerated an officer and found a complaint unfounded, where they shouldn't have. They should have actually filed an additional finding complaint and sustained a complaint against that officer for failure to activate his body-worn camera. This is one I'm going to go ahead and I'll run you through the story of what actually happened, and then we're going to walk through some of the video because I have the Civilian Review Board meeting pulled up and I have some highlighted sections here that I'm going to kind of show you and that we're going to use as examples of kind of why it is that they don't know what they're talking about. So the incident that we're talking about today, or the complaint that was filed against an officer, it came from a woman that was driving in her vehicle one evening, and she was driving with her high beams on. The reason she was driving with her high beams on is because she has one headlight out. And if you don't realize this, you actually have multiple bulbs in your headlights. And if your main driving headlight is out and you flick on your high beams, an additional bulb is on, so it'll look like you have two headlights on. A lot of people do this, and I've actually stopped people for this many times over the years. And this is exactly what the officer did. Although he didn't do a traffic stop, he just kind of pulled up to her. So the officer sees a car driving with her high beams on, pulls up to her and says, "Hey, you got your high beams on, can you turn them off?" That's when she says, "I know my high beams are on, but I have a headlight that's out. And if I turn on my high beams, I'll have two headlights, and I'm trying to comply with the law." This is a conversation I've had with citizens on multiple occasions because I can't stand people that drive with their high beams on. And I'll say, "Listen, I understand that you have a headlight out and you're trying to make it right. Unfortunately, driving with your high beams on is a violation, and driving with one headlight is also a violation." For me as a police officer, and I think that generally speaking, most police officers would agree with me, I am less likely to write you a ticket for one headlight on, one headlight out than I am for driving with your high beams, because driving with your high beams pisses me off. It blinds me and I can't see. If you're driving with one headlight, I'm going to give you more often than not a little bit of benefit of the doubt. You know, I might stop that car, I might make sure you have your driver's license, make sure that you're not up to no good and all those other things. If I stop you with one headlight out and everything else checks out, I'm probably going to let you go with a warning. If I stop you for driving with your high beams on and then you start arguing with me, I'm probably going to give you a ticket for driving with your high beams on. That's kind of how that goes. So the woman explained the reason why she was driving with her high beams on. The officer explained it to her similar to the way I just did to you, and she wanted to continue to argue with him. And I'm assuming this conversation went something to the effect of, "Listen, lady, turn your damn high beams off because I can write you a ticket for that if I want to. Do what I say. That's the law, right?" This woman was offended by this. She called the Department of Inspector General and filed a complaint against the officer for being rude and discourteous. Her exact words were that she felt she was being bullied and harassed by this police officer because he repeatedly told her that he could write her a traffic citation for her activity. The Office of the Inspector General conducted their investigation. They interviewed the person. They then went and looked for body-worn camera footage of the incident and were unable to find any body-worn camera footage. They then interviewed the officer, and he said something to the effect of, "You know, I do this frequently. I'm driving down the road. I see somebody with a minor equipment violation. I pull up next to him and I give him a warning, just a quick verbal warning. and then I move on. I do this so often that I don't even recall this particular incident. When I have these chance encounters with people, I assume, you know, I probably just forgot to turn on my body camera. I didn't think that it was necessary to turn on my body camera in this situation. Therefore, there is no footage. We're going to see in the video, actually, I can play that part of the civilian review board for you right now, where they read that part and they say, you know, due to lack of evidence to prove this woman's claim, we're going to close it out as exonerated because there was no body-worn camera footage.
Based on the information and statements, the Columbus DIG found no evidence to substantiate the allegation. Also, the Columbus DIG concludes if the officer's action had occurred, it would not have violated any CPD policies or procedures or laws. Therefore, it's recommended the allegation against the officer be closed with the finding of unfounded. There was no BWC. He didn't activate it because he was still inside his cruiser.
Alrighty, so I don't know if you guys can hear that okay. If I have to in editing, I'll make that a little bit louder. He was speaking pretty softly there. But the Office of the Inspector General said, hey, look, there's no evidence to substantiate her claim. Even if there was video, she was in the wrong. She was driving with her high beams on. Therefore, we're going to find this unfounded, and we're just going to move on to the next complaint. The problem with that is that her complaint wasn't that she was stopped for driving with her high beams on. Her complaint was that she felt that this officer was being rude and discourteous towards her. There was no body-worn camera footage to show anything about that complaint. They decided to make it unfounded. But what you're supposed to do in that case is you're supposed to list other things found in the course of the investigation. The other thing found in the course of that investigation, there was no body-worn camera footage. He's supposed to have his body-worn camera activated during that circumstance, and I'll get into the details of that here in a little bit. But what that would do was that could potentially exonerate the officer, or it could be found that he was rude and discourteous towards that person, that he didn't just pull up to her and say, hey, ma'am, your high beams are on. It could be found that he pulled up and he said, hey, turn your fucking high beams off. You're blinding me as I was driving down the road, and I'm going to crash my fucking car. Get your fucking shit fixed. You know, like, he could have said something like that, and it's a very different conversation. Unfortunately, there's no proof one way or the other as to what happened. You know, that's the reason we have body-worn cameras. The funny thing about this particular case, and, you know, there's a lot that goes into these things. I'm assuming that the complainant was just being trivial and making a kind of a bullshit complaint, and that the way she spoke to the investigators and all that other stuff and her intake call kind of caused the investigators to have that attitude towards her, which caused them to kind of err on the side of the officer. But the problem is, these are supposed to be black and white issues. These are not things that you're supposed to be putting your opinion and your personal beliefs in. And, you know, these rules exist for a reason. They're important and they need to be enforced appropriately. You know, this should have been a finding that his body-worn camera was not turned on. There was no information to prove whether or not he was rude and discourteous, but we're going to sustain a complaint for failure to activate his body-worn camera. And it's funny because the next clip I have is actually from Kyle Strickland, and this is one of those things where I'm going to say, if you throw enough shit at the wall, eventually something is going to stick. And this is one of those instances where Kyle Strickland, who threw enough shit at the wall, he actually, or maybe even a blind squirrel finds a nut occasionally. That's another one, because he actually challenges him on this. He's like, wait a minute, there was no body-worn camera footage. Is that okay according to policy?
What is the policy? Are they supposed to, in that instance, turn on their body-worn camera?
From the way I read it, the way I understood it, I don't even think he got out of his cruiser, so I don't know if they have to activate it while they're in their cruiser.
Do we have?
Isn't it automatic now when they get out of the cruisers? Isn't it set up to be automatic or something now that it comes on? Because we had so many of them that we're not turning them on.
That I'm not sure.
So this is one of those situations where these answers are very easy to find. They're written down in black and white, and they're online for the whole world to see. If you go on your Google machine and you type into your Google machine Columbus Police Directives, you're going to find the answer to this question. But these people, these investigators, you know, let's see right here, the people sitting at this table right here, these are the ones that investigate the complaints. They're supposed to understand the directives backwards and forwards. Every case that is brought up in a meeting, if I was the inspector general and I was one of her advisors, all of the pertinent issues that are going to be brought up in today's cases, I would have the directives ready to go. I would probably read up on them prior to the meeting. Even better yet, if I am the inspector general, Jacqueline Hendricks, if I am signing off on these reports, either exonerating or sustaining complaints against officers, I would probably look at that actual directive and make sure I understand what it is before I sign off on these reports. But that's not what's happening. The other thing is that these members of the Civilian Review Board, they're asking questions about the directives and what these directives say and what are the rules and all this. They should also be looking at these things. Willard McIntosh, the guy that's reading this investigative summary, he is a former Columbus police officer. He should know these directives. He's the one that's presenting this case to the rest of the board. He should have already looked up this directive so that when Kyle Strickland asks a question, Willard McIntosh should be able to look at him with confidence and say, here is what the directive says. Instead, he's like, I'm not sure.
Isn't it set up to be automatic or something now that it comes on because we have so many of them that we're not turning them on?
That I'm not sure.
Which is hilarious. And also the amount of misinformation and just dumb shit that is out there. This guy, I forget his name. He doesn't know anything. He's one of the least capable people on the Civilian Review Board. He said, isn't the body camera supposed to just turn on automatically when the officer gets out of the car? No, that's stupid. Every time I get out of my car, my body camera is automatically going to turn on. Like when I get out to pump gas, I get out to take a leak. There's a billion reasons why I stop and get out of my car. My body camera does not need to turn on every time I get out of the car. That kind of information out in the public is stupid and dangerous. I don't understand why people do that stuff. But the body-worn camera, just for you, those of you that don't know, the times that it will automatically come on is when I kick on my lights and sirens. That automatically will activate my body-worn camera. They're wirelessly synced together. Also, I have a shotgun rack behind me. There's a button that releases my shotgun. If I hit that button, my body-worn camera automatically activates. If I'm driving down the road, and I think if I go over 80 miles an hour, the cruiser camera automatically kicks on, and that triggers my body camera to automatically kick on. Also, if I am near another cruiser that activates their lights and sirens and their cruiser camera, that will automatically activate my body camera. So if I drive by someone else's traffic stop, my body camera is going to turn on. If I'm sitting at the substation and somebody outside is doing a functions check on their lights and sirens, my body camera is going to turn on. If I'm sitting inside the substation and somebody outside is unloading their cruiser and they hit the button to eject the shotgun so they can put the shotgun back in the safe at the end of their shift, my body camera is going to turn on. Other than that, if I need my body camera on, I have to reach down and double tap my body camera and turn it on. There are rules regulating when I'm supposed to turn on my body camera, and that's what I have right here. I'm not going to read this entire thing, but it says, officers shall wear their body cameras, and it has a little bit of stuff about plainclothes officers and this stuff. And then this is where I want to get into it, and specifically on self-initiated activity. This is the body-worn camera policy for the Columbus Division of Police. It's in black and white. It's very easy to understand. I'll start with the dispatched calls just because people might be curious about that. So when dispatched on a call for service, the officer shall activate his BWC upon when dispatched or upon self-initiated response to all dispatch calls for service. That means that when I'm in my cruiser and a dispatcher gets a hold of me and sends me on a dispatch call for service, it's supposed to say, I copy, I'm en route, activate my body camera, put the microphone down, and drive. So you're going to get 8 to 10 minutes of me driving to scene on my body camera per the directive. The other thing is, if one of my friends gets sent on a domestic violence call and I start driving that way, the minute that I grab the radio and I say, hey, can you add me to that domestic, put my radio down, I am now attached to that run. I'm supposed to activate my body worn camera. That's how it goes for dispatch calls for service. Now, self-initiated activity is right here. Sworn personnel shall activate the body worn camera prior to exiting the vehicle, or if not in a vehicle, prior to approaching an individual for self-initiated enforcement actions, investigative activities, and citizen contacts, or anytime citizen contact is likely to occur. This is a catch-all phrase that's put into policy on purpose. It's not, you shall turn it on prior to exiting the vehicle, or if not in a vehicle, prior to approaching a vehicle. These are all or statements. So if you do this, or you do this, or you do this, or you do this, these are all of the times you have to activate your body worn camera. Anytime citizen contact is likely to occur, you're required to turn on your body worn camera. Now, as a police officer, because I'm a police officer, I've been a police officer for a long time, there's a lot of times where you're just out in public and citizen contact is not likely, or it might be incidental. I don't, like, when I get out of my car and I go into a gas station, I don't turn on my body camera. I'm not required to turn on my body camera in those instances, and I don't think anyone in my chain of command would believe that I am required to turn on my body camera. But one thing that I personally like to do, because I'm an oddball, I'm a man of the people, I like to go into a gas station, get my cup of coffee, walk up to the counter, and I'll lean up against the counter and sit there and sip on my coffee for 15, 20 minutes. As people walk in and out of the gas station, I say hi to them. I have casual conversations with them. Nothing out of the ordinary. I just like to kind of be officer friendly, out for the public to be able to see and interact with. I don't have my body camera on for those kinds of interactions. Now, if somebody walks up to me and says, hey officer, I have a question, or I have a problem, or can you do something for me? That's when I'm required to turn on my body camera. There's also times where I might be out of my cruiser and I come in contact with a citizen, and it goes from just like, hey sir, hey, officer, thanks for your service, how you doing today? And then it turns into an actual conversation about something. They want to talk to me about their cousin's stolen car, and I'm starting to give them advice. And as the conversation goes on, I remember, oh, you know what? My body camera is not on, and I'm actually talking about something relevant to police work. I need to turn it on. So I turn it on to document it like I'm supposed to, but also to protect myself, because I don't want to get in trouble for not having my body camera on. Instances like what happened with that officer, where he just pulls up to somebody who has their high beams on, and he's going to give them a quick warning. He's supposed to have his body camera on for that kind of interaction. One thing that I would do if I were in that situation is, if I pulled up on someone and said, hey, your high beams are on, and they said, oh, thanks officer, and they turn them off, I would probably just start driving again. If I pulled up on somebody and I said, hey, your high beam's on, and they want to start arguing with me, I would go ahead and activate my body worn camera. That's what the policy says that you're supposed to do anytime that you have self-initiated contact with a citizen. And it's a violation of policy. Now, where does that policy violation go? It doesn't really go anywhere. It's not a big deal. It's a very minor policy violation, especially in the context of this particular call. This is one where you're found in violation of policy, and it gets documented in the file as a I forget what they call it, like a constructive counseling. That just means that, hey, your supervisor comes up to you and says, hey, in those situations, make sure you activate your body worn camera. It'll save us some hassle in the future. The officer's like, oh, you know what? You're right. I should have had my body camera on. Moving on. No big deal. Nothing permanent in his file. No progressive discipline or anything like that. Just a quick, hey, dude, you screwed up. Make sure you fix yourself. That's all it comes to. But it's just the fact of the matter that it's a very clear violation of policy, and they missed it. Not only did they miss it, but they spent 20 minutes roughly arguing about it. So there was that part. Let's go through the rest of the clips that I have for them. And this video is already approaching 20 minutes, so I want to end it soon. But I think it's funny the lengths that they went to try to defend the officer, saying that this was not a policy violation when it very clearly was. And what this demonstrates is that they don't know what they're talking about.
Potential encounter.
If the encounter is self-initiated and the officer is in their vehicle, I believe the directive just says prior to exiting the vehicle, the officer shall activate BWC. So it doesn't require officer to, during the entire time while driving the vehicle, have the BWC. Yeah,
we just covered that. It's shall activate prior to exiting a vehicle, or, and it says, or anytime citizen contact is likely to occur. This is simple stuff. Anyone with half a brain can look this up
encounter. Now, again, it seems that it's not necessarily a policy because of the exiting. You have to exit.
It's funny because they have him convinced about it, but he's still not quite sure. And his point is actually my point. Even though the officer probably didn't do anything wrong, it would be nice to have that recording, and that's the reason the policy is written the way it is.
And is that complainants make allegations all the time, and they are going to describe in their words what they feel occurred. What we look at is, if you're going to say that the officer bullied or rude or antagonized you, you're going to have to give a description as to why you felt that.
I don't know why I highlighted that, because she was trying to say that that the caller or the person complaining didn't give any description or anything like that of why she felt like she was bullied, and then she's going to contradict herself here in a second. This is Jacqueline Hendricks, the actual Inspector General for the City of Columbus Department of Public Safety. It's her job to sign off on all of these reports and to know the directives. And this is a situation where she's sitting here listening to this and participating in this conversation, and it's very clear that she doesn't know the directives that she's supposed to be enforcing.
Under analysis and finding, it states the complainant reported to the Columbus DIG on May the 6th, 2023, that such and such bullied her, was rude and antagonizing her by repeatedly saying he could pull her over for having her bright lights on. The complainant had her bright lights on, and because only one of her normal headlights was working, and she felt having two lights on was better than one.
Oh.
That was the statement that was provided regarding why she felt the officer bullied, was rude, and antagonized her over that.
See, even she contradicts herself, because in this clip here that I showed you, she was like, if you're going to call in and file a complaint, you have to give me some details about what it is that you thought you were bullying on. And the complainant in this case didn't do that. And like less than a minute later, she goes through and reads this person detailing the reasons that she felt that she was being bullied and harassed. Now, again, this kind of complaint is very common, where an officer just takes a very innocuous encounter, says, hey, your bright headlights are on, you need to turn them down. Then it turns into an argument, and the person is so insulted that the officer made contact with them to warn them. I shouldn't get into this story right now, but I will. This is my very first internal affairs complaint that I ever had as a police officer. This was back in 2011 or 12, prior to ever having body-worn cameras. And I was working near Children's Hospital in a very high crime area, very heavily occupied by gang violence, a lot of shootings and drugs and prostitution and stuff like that. I was patrolling that night, and I saw a car driving down a very busy, very major road with no headlights on. So I pull up behind the car, activate my lights, walk up to the car, and it was like a middle-aged white dude with a kid in the back seat that looked like he was between 8 and 10 years old. A white kid in the back seat, young kid. And it was probably midnight or 1 a.m. It was late or early morning hours. I walk up to the car, and the guy was friendly and courteous and everything with me. And I said, hey, sir, my name's Officer Ben. I'm with the police department. Do you have any idea why I pulled you over tonight? And the guy goes, nope. and he smiled at me. I think he had the attitude, I must have done something wrong, but I don't know what I did wrong. And I said, well, your headlights are off. And he looks down, he turned on his headlights. He goes, you're right. I'm sorry. I should have had my headlights on. I go, that's not a big deal. Do you have your license on your night? You know, I was a very, very new officer, very young officer. And when you're a new officer on the job, it's drilled into your head that every single person you run their license to make sure it's valid, and you run them for warrants. So while he's searching for his driver's license, I look in the back seat, and this like 8 to 10-year-old boy that's laying in the back seat was laying down across the seats with the seatbelt on, and the seatbelt was just over his rib cage. So the kid's laying down, and the shoulder belt was under his arm. It wasn't over, it was under. And I remember from driver's education that, you know, you have to have that shoulder belt over your shoulder. The reason being, if it's under your arm and you get into an accident, when that tightens up, it's going to drive your ribs into your lungs and potentially kill you, or at least cause very serious injury. So I looked in the back seat at the kid that was laying down with the shoulder strap under his arm like that. And I said, hey, what's he doing back there? And he goes, oh, he's just sleeping. And I said, well, why is he wearing the seatbelt like that? And he said, well, it's just more comfortable for him. You know, it's really late at night. He doesn't want to be like, he doesn't want to wear the seatbelt normally. And I said, well, unfortunately, you have to sit up and you have to wear your seatbelt properly, because you're driving with your headlights on. If you get into a traffic crash, he can be very, very seriously wounded by, you know, and I explained the whole rib cage thing. The guy hands me his license. I walk back to my cruiser, and my partner was on the other side of the car. He just stayed up there with him as I went and ran his license for everything. I returned like a minute later, and he gives me this like disgusted look on his face, takes his license back, and drives on after I say, you know, have a good night, drive safely. My partner looks at me and goes, man, you really pissed that guy off. I was like, what? And I guess the guy was like, my daughter's a nurse and she knows more about traumatic car accidents than this punk ass officer is ever going to know, blah, blah, blah. He was highly offended that I told him that he should not have his son in the back seat wearing a seatbelt like that way. He was so offended by that he actually called internal affairs and complained on me. That was back in the day when things were done appropriately. And the internal affairs sergeant said, listen, what you're describing to me is not a policy violation at all. What the officer is doing is actually giving you proper advice. If you can't articulate that he did anything wrong, I'm not going to open up an investigation on him. And the internal affairs investigator actually called my supervisor, let my supervisor know that happened. My supervisor called me in the office, and he said, hey, was there something about some guy with a kid not wearing a seatbelt and you yelled at him? And I was like, I didn't yell at him. I just told him, hey, you know, you can't wear your seatbelt like that, you know, whatever. But we get a lot of these stupid frivolous complaints. And the body worn cameras are a way that we kind of protect ourselves from, you know, getting disciplined, or we can even expose these people as making fictitious complaints against us. That is the situation here. And I appreciate the fact that they're trying to give the officer the benefit of the doubt, but it's also important to remind the officers, hey, this is one of those situations where you should have gone ahead and turned on your camera. And it's not a discipline thing. It's not a bad thing. This is one of those things that we would also cover at roll call. Like my sergeant that I have now, and pretty much every sergeant that I've ever had, if one of his officers had this very same thing happen to him, the next day at roll call, or probably the next 3 or 4 days at roll call, he would come in and sit down, give us our car assignments and everything. And he would say, hey, also, we just had a guy get, have a complaint sustained against him for failure to turn on his body camera. Just remember, guys, even if it's just a chance interaction, you don't think anything's going to come of it. If you're talking to a citizen about any kind of enforcement action whatsoever, just turn on your camera. That's the reason they have the 2-minute look back. You know, a lot of people were concerned, oh, you got 2-minute look back with audio, you're going to catch me driving to scene and talking about, you know, doing things with my wife and stuff like that, and it's a violation of my privacy, whatever. Well, that 2-minute look back also protects you from getting hemmed up in situations like this. If I have a chance encounter with a citizen and they start getting really upset with me and I haven't turned on my camera, I can reach down and turn it on, and they're going to get the last 2 minutes of the conversation. if I turn on my camera a little bit late and I miss the beginning, but I get the guts of the conversation, that kind of stuff can be mitigated and you don't necessarily get in trouble for it. But, you know, situations like this where you have a citizen that's making a lot of allegations, saying that you were rude and discourteous and berating them and threatening them, and you didn't turn on your camera, this could have very easily gone the other way. So turn on your camera, protect yourself, and also it's right here in the directives. I don't know why it is that the Inspector General, the investigators for the Inspector General, the legal counsel for the Inspector General, and the members of the Civilian Review Board are unable to read simple things like policy statements like this. I think it's it for me today. I'm sorry I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys later.